Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Shropshire Pilot Vlogcast. I'm Luke, a student helicopter pilot from Shropshire, and I'm documenting my experience without leaving anything out so you can see what it's really like. Along the way, I'll be sharing things I wish I'd known before I started, so unless you're already flying left seat in a 777 or right seat in a 109, I'm sure you'll find these videos useful. Today I'll be talking about which aviation products you actually need to buy before discussing the ground school exams and showing you around the airport I'm flying at. Let's do this. When it comes to aviation, there's quite literally no limit to what you can spend money on, and although you don't really need much at the start of your training, once you're absolutely sure it's something you want to do, it's time to go shopping. Your flight school will probably provide you with the basics, and the airport reception will stock certain products, so check with them before you buy online, but there are 4 main websites I've used: afeonline.com, flightstore.co.uk, poolies.com, and transair.co.uk. Now we've covered where to buy from, let's look at what you actually need. Firstly, you'll want a logbook, which is where you record the hours you spend flying. It's vital you get one of these, as it's used together with your flight school record to issue your license, and if you get too far ahead without one, filling it out later will be an arduous task. Another good habit to get into right from the beginning is studying. It's definitely not as fun as flying, but important nonetheless, as there are several ground school exams you need to pass, which I'll cover in more detail later on. Basically, you need some good old-fashioned books, and there are obviously different ones for fixed or rotary wing, but Pooley's do an excellent set for both called the Air Pilot's Manuals. I've got number 2, Air Law and Meteorology, number 3, Navigation, number 6, Human Performance and Limitations and Operational Procedures, and number 7, Communications, all of which I've read and highly recommend. For my fellow helicopter pilots, I also suggest Private Helicopter Pilot Studies by Phil Croucher. It covers all the topics in the exams and naturally focuses more on helicopters, which is good because reading anything else often makes it sound like we rotorheads don't exist. Similarly, Helicopter Aerodynamics Made Simple by Jeff Day really helped me understand the black magic that keeps us in the air. It's very easy to feel completely overwhelmed by the vast amount you need to learn, so in my opinion there are some books that you don't need at this early stage in your training, such as those written for more experienced pilots. For helicopters, I'd argue that Principles of Flight by W.J. Wagton Donk and the Helicopter Pilot's Manual Volume 2 by Norman Bailey are examples of these, and there are many more for both fixed and rotary wing. I'm sure they'll be invaluable for the CPL, but I bought both, read neither, and still managed to pass all my PPL exams, so don't feel like you have to go on a book buying spree. Once you start navigation flights, it's time to spend even more money. Firstly, you'll need a flight computer, which contrary to its name is not actually electronic. This is a Pooley's CRP5W, and there are others, but they all work in a similar way with 2 sides. A circular slide rule side that calculates and converts temperature, time, distance, volume, altitude, speed, weight, fuel endurance, etc., and a wind triangle side that calculates heading and ground speed, wind velocity, and head and crosswind components. This clever device can work out almost anything, and it's an integral part of your flight planning, but if you're not going any further than the PPL, you may not need the one I've got, which was the most expensive, so have a look at the other options before you buy one. If you are looking for a CRP5, let me save you some time and explain the bizarrely controversial wind arm. All it really does is save you drawing and erasing pencil markings on the face, as you simply set the wind direction, which conveniently moves with the heading indicator, and read the necessary information. Secondly, you'll need a map so you can see where you're going, and aviation mostly uses 1/4 and 1/2 mil charts, so called due to their scale. 1/2 mil covers a wider area but shows less detail than 1/4 mil, so be sure to choose the correct chart for the area you're flying in. Next, you'll need the tools for plotting your route, which include a flight log, protractor, scale ruler, and fine permanent markers, but there are also some lesser known items worth buying, like a whiteboard marker to erase permanent marker, bulldog clips to tame an unruly chart, a calculator since you can't take your phone into the exams, a pencil to fill out your flight log as you'll definitely make mistakes, and Tipp-Ex because you can't use pencil in your logbook and at some point you'll make mistakes there too. The websites I mentioned earlier all offer PPL starter kits, and although I'm sure they're mostly well intentioned, they can be expensive and include things you don't necessarily need along with products that aren't the best quality. I bought everything separately and put my spare cash towards the following optional extras that you might want to consider too. For example, you'll need a bag to put all your new stuff in, and there are of course lots of expensive cases specifically tailored to pilots, but like me, you might already own something suitable and can always upgrade later. This is a fuel tester, which is used to check for impurities and contamination in the fuel, and although your flight school probably has one already, it can be useful to have your own. This is a knee board, which is a convenient way of securing your chart and flight log, but be sure to check the size as you don't want to be obstructed in the small cockpit. Now, a headset shouldn't really be an early purchase as your flight school will provide them, but not all headsets are created equal, and there's no denying the advantages of having your own. There are two types of noise reduction or attenuation used in aviation headsets: passive or PNR and active or ANR. Passive headsets like these reduce the noise through the materials they're constructed from, which typically makes them larger and heavier, and active headsets create sound waves that cancel out the noise, which makes them smaller and lighter. There are pros and cons to both, but what appealed to me is the fact there's less to go wrong with a passive headset, and I personally don't like the way noise cancellation warps the sound. Even after deciding between passive and active, there's still a bewildering number of headsets on the market at various price points, but as a musician acutely aware that hearing loss is irreversible, I went with the best I could afford, which was the David Clark H1060H passive headset. For my fellow helicopter pilots, I chose this over the other models because it has an electret or condenser microphone, pressure adjustment, and interchangeable cord assemblies for future commercial operations. If you're brave enough, you can also buy active noise cancelling kits to modify passive headsets yourself. Finally, getting an iPad or Android tablet is debatable because you'll be tested on the old-fashioned ways of doing things, and although I've seen commercial pilots use apps like Runway HD and SkyDemon to great effect, becoming dependent on them as a student pilot isn't advisable. Speaking of apps, there are plenty of options to help you practice for the exams. However, they all suffer from the same issue, which is a lack of questions compared to the real thing due to the new e-exam system introduced by the UK CAA in October 2020. Prior to this, the exams were paper-based and questions more or less set, but now they're taken electronically from a randomised database of thousands of questions, so if you've heard the exams are easy, that's not true, and sadly the pass rates prove it. I don't want to put you off, but you really do need to know your stuff, so self-study and at least try and pay attention in ground school. For my fellow helicopter pilots, I downloaded quite a few apps, and unfortunately none of them contained helicopter-specific questions, so in the end I chose Quiz Aero, which is web-based rather than an app, but provides a helicopter syllabus and a good bank of questions for a fair price. As for the exams themselves, there are 9 for the PPL syllabus, which my flight school organised into groups of 3 in the following order: Air Law, Operational Procedures, Aircraft General Knowledge, Human Performance, Meteorology, Navigation, Flight Performance and Planning, Principles of Flight and Communications. Also, if you haven't already, you need to register as a candidate on the CAA Portal so your flight school can book exams on your behalf. It's a slightly convoluted process requiring 2 forms of ID, but it's relatively straightforward and you only need to do it once. Despite its drawbacks, the CAA Portal does provide a range of useful features and information, and it's also where you book medical services. The final thing you might consider spending some money on is flight simulation, and having grown up on simulators, this was always something I was interested in. I built this control rig from an old IKEA chair and some spray-painted pieces of wood. This is a Microsoft Sidewinder joystick which is at least 10 years old, and the collective and pedals are second-hand. The collective is a CH Pro throttle mounted on its side, and I replaced the footboards on this CH Pro pedal with IKEA toilet roll holders so they're more like helicopter pedals. I bought X-Plane 11 through Steam and the V-Skylabs Robinson R44, and also registered with VATSIM, which is a free global network that provides real-time radio communication for flight simulators. All of this cost less than £150, and although it's definitely no substitute for the real thing, I found it very useful for practicing procedures, navigation and radio calls, which has helped my flying in the real world. Before I wrap this video up, I'll give you a quick tour around Welshpool Mid Wales Airport, which is where I'm training. The Welsh Air Ambulance is based here, and they've always got a perfect view of me lifting into the hover, which must be entertaining. From the car park, you're right on the apron with a good view of the runway as you pass the hangars to reception. Dragon Wings microlights and Wizard helicopters are down the far end, along with the Fuel Stop Cafe, which is excellent. This is the pilot lounge leading to the Cafe Terrace, which is a great spot for watching aircraft take off and land. Overall, Welshpool is a brilliant airport, so if you haven't been before, it's well worth checking out. So that's it for today's episode, and as usual, if you have any questions, just leave a comment or contact me on Instagram or TikTok. Next time, I'll be talking about my qualifying cross-country flight and how I'm preparing for the PPL skills test. Have a great day and happy flying.